Born in 1270, William Wallace was the son of a Scottish landowner. At age 27, just a few years after Scotland lost its freedom, William Wallace made efforts to make Scotland free from England. In 1296, King Edward I of England forced King John de Balliol of Scotland to give up his throne, and the King of Scotland was jailed. King Edward then made himself ruler of Scotland. In May of 1297, Wallace and 30 other men went to the town of Lanark and burned it to the ground. They then killed a sheriff from England, and Wallace set up a small army and attacked strongholds set up by the English.
On September 11, 1297, a force of English soldiers led by John de Warian met Wallace's small Scottish army at the Forth River near Stirling. Wallace's troops were outnumbered by a big majority, but Warian's troops had to cross a narrow bridge to attack the Scottish force. As the English soldiers crossed the bridge, the Scottish force cut them down. The English retreated but had over 5,000 casualties. Wallace then went on to capture Stirling Castle and continued into northern Europe and caused havoc for several months. In December, he returned to Scotland and was made guardian of the kingdom. Wallace ruled in peace until Edward I returned from wars in France and marched into Scotland on July 3rd to try and crush the rebellion. King Edward's troops numbered 15,000, with most of them veterans from England, Ireland, and Wales. Wallace used hit-and-run tactics and destroyed fields as they retreated in an attempt to weaken the English army. The Scottish needed to stop Edward's forces before they reached Stirling Castle. On July 22nd, Edward's and Wallace's troops faced off at the Battle of Falkirk. Wallace chose a marshy field in which to face the English. The Scottish suffered horrible casualties and were easily defeated by the superior English forces. Edward failed to completely end the rebellion, but he did destroy William Wallace's military reputation. Wallace resigned from his role as guardian of Scotland. It is suspected that Wallace went to France in 1299, possibly to ask for assistance from the French because the English and the French were bitter enemies. Then he returned to Scotland and continued some guerrilla warfare for the next 4 years.
William Wallace had made himself a thorn in the side of King Edward. King Edward had put a reward on Wallace and ordered Scots to deliver him. August 3rd, 1305. Wallace was captured in Royston. Then he was taken to Carsley, where he was bound hand and foot and then sent off to London. August 23rd, 1305. Wallace had his trial in Westminster Hall for all his crimes, like his murder and his so-called treason. Sadly, this was only just a formality, because his fate was already decided. He was found guilty and was sentenced to being hung, drawn, and quartered. Before his actual execution, Wallace was dragged through the streets of Elms on a wooden hurdle. Then he was hung from a gallows, but he was cut down when he was still alive, so he could be disemboweled before his head was hacked off and the rest of him cut into pieces. To show the cost of treason, Wallace's head was spiked above London Bridge, and the quarters of his body were sent to Bredwick, Newcastle-upon-Tyne, Stirling, and Perth. King Edward had thought that eventually William Wallace would be forgotten, because of his humiliating death. But actually this had the opposite effect. The common people in Scotland told the legacy of William Wallace to their children and all of his great deeds, and this inspired them to revolt against the British once again. 23 years after the death of William Wallace, the Scottish people finally got the independence they wanted and deserved. William Wallace had the leadership ability to inspire the Scottish people to fight for what they wanted, even after his own death, and continues to inspire countless others to fight for what they want,